Hello, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and my guest today is Frederick Joseph, an award-winning writer and New York Times best-selling author. His powerful works include The Black Friend and We Alive, Beloved, among so many others to be so young. Frederick has also contributed to prominent publications like the Boston Globe, Essence Magazine, and the Huffington Post. And he joins me today to discuss his latest book, This Thing of Ours. I love this. Now, thank you so much for joining us here on Black America. And I know that you're a YA writer mostly.
Yes, yes.
You know, but I want you to know that I fell into this novel. It's your first, is it your first novel?
Yeah, my first novel.
You know, I mean, but he's has 2 books that have been New York Times bestsellers and, I mean, just incredible success. But now the novel is, I found myself saying, oh, I think I'll just, you know, breeze through this, take a look, and I've read every single word of it. So there's a compliment. Our producer director Audrey can assure you that that is a compliment. But as I was saying to you before we started, this book hits on every single hot topic, breaking the news that we're living in today. Tell us about Ossie Brown.
Yeah, I mean, Ossie is, well, first of all, named after the great Ossie Davis.
Of course. For those of you who don't know, Ossie Davis.
Yes, absolutely.
Great actor.
Yes, great actor, orator, activist, philanthropist, and husband of the wonderful Ruby Dee.
Right.
Yes. And so this book, I wanted to tell a story about a young Black man who's trying to figure out in this contemporary world that we're in, navigating the intersection of social media, having a bit of fame, loss, classism, all sort of the things that Black kids in general are going through, that we're going through. And actually at the center of the book is actually book bans, curriculum bans, and sort of this, without realizing it, this conversation, you know, this anti-woke agenda, if you would, that's, you know, sort of taking place in America a bit. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, the book starts out, I mean, Ossie is destined, he thinks, to be a basketball player. So the top of it is, you know, where you're saying, oh, here's another basketball story. But then it's actually a writing workshop story.
Yeah.
That has more drama than I expected.
Yeah. I think, so the hook for me was bringing young people in, especially, I'll be honest, young men and boys, right? And so I think that starting the book with this sort of like really intense basketball scene, and this character that seems sort of destined to become, you know, the next LeBron James or something, and then tearing that away.
Right.
And then getting to the root in the book of who you actually are beyond the physical utility that you have in this world, right? Besides basketball or football or baseball and all these things that sort of like entertain the world, who are you as a young man? And so, yeah, the book deeply centers, I would say, not just a coming of age story, but really sort of a coming of life story for many of the characters.
Right. And the 3 main characters, Naima and Luis and Ossie. I was going to say and you, no, and Ossie.
Basically, in some aspects, yes.
Right. I mean, and it's 3 kids of color who are in an all-white high school, and that's the first. That's how they come together originally. So you're talking about race, for one thing.
Yeah.
Classism.
Yeah. So with the classism, this is one of those sort of like elite schools, right? You know, the sort of upper echelon of, you know, students financially. And Naima and Luis, the 2 of them are actually from pretty well-off families. I'd say Luis, he's from a actual affluent family, being the son of a former NFL player. And in Naima's family, they are sort of this upper middle class. You know, mother is in medicine, father is a professor, so on and so forth. And then Ossie, he grows up in the projects, right? And so how do you have a conversation also about class, not just in terms of people of color and then white people, but even within people of color, there are all sorts of economic levels, right? And I think that's important to have that distinction and understanding that, blackness and being a person of color in general doesn't always look the same either.
Exactly. You've drawn your characters extremely well. I mean, you
Appreciate
can
that.
just see everybody and everything. So congratulations
Thank you.
with that. So there's the racism and the classism, but then there's, homophobia. There's, everything. But
Yeah.
but to get, I don't want to blow your whole.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I know. You can tell I enjoyed this story. But I think the whole idea about the writing workshop and the drama that takes place there as we are living it this very day about what authors are going to be taught and what writing is going to be accepted.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know we would be in this moment. I think people who aren't in publishing, I don't know if they necessarily all know, when books come out, they were usually written years before. And so to have written a book that centers young people reading Octavia Butler and James Baldwin and Sonia Sanchez and all these, great writers who are also now a part of this, sort of counterculture movement in America. And that's a conversation within the book because, again, not spoiling anything, but part of the movement of the book, the motion to get us through the story is white parents not wanting their kids to read someone like a James Baldwin, not wanting to read a queer author, not wanting to read a black author or a brown author, so on and so forth. And sort of the conversation that arises from that and how our main, characters help combat that.
So, yeah, well, anyway, it's fabulous. We're going to talk, well, I'm sure we'll cycle back to it because one of the main characters is the grandmother in the book. And your grandmother was the inspiration for you to write. Tell us about her.
Yeah. So my grandmother, Thelma Ford, taught me to write. She was one of the most important people to ever come into my life. And I think she was honestly one of the most important people to ever walk this earth. But like many black women now and historically, the opportunities for her to sort of chase her dreams weren't there. And so she sort of instilled in me this love of not just literature, but words, right? Words in songs, words on the page, words as they're coming out of our mouths, right? And I sort of began writing largely just to honor her. I think I wanted my career to give me a chance to do the things and tell the types of stories that she taught me. And so when I wrote this book, I knew I had to write my grandmother into the book. And so, some things happened that parallel things that really took place in my own life. And but Grandma Alice is just a force.
Right. Or Grandma Alice in the
in the book. Yes,
in the book.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Who demands a Sunday appearance no matter what.
Yes,
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Well, now when you talk about your writing career, I mean, as I was looking at some videos and Instagram and whatever, I don't know what it's, 250,000 people are already following you.
Yeah, something around that.
Right, something like that, right? You talk about the fact that for 13 years, you didn't write. You thought you were a writer, and you wrote something, and you got put down.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's probably one of the most important things I talk to young people about. When we see people on the other side of things, like obviously my career is still sort of growing as we sit here, but I'm in a certain place, right? And people will see them like, okay, you must have been writing actively and really believing in your own words since you were younger. I'm like, no, not at all. In fact, part of the reason I also wrote some of these characters is because I had educators at different points who told me I wasn't a writer, right? Who told me that I wasn't going to be able to do this, that I wasn't, in many instances, a good writer, right? As opposed to working with me to hone my skill, hone my talent, sort of like relegated me to sort of be a 6'2" black boy who would do something physical, maybe go, work somewhere and use my physicality, but I wasn't going to be desired on the page. That was for sure from what I was taught.
And it was a friend of yours who discovered.
Yeah. So I had a roommate actually, and I still loved writing, so I would write essays to myself and about all sorts of random things and in a notebook. This is when people actually still had notebooks and things like that.
I remember that. No, in fact, I still have a notebook.
Yeah, so do I. And so this friend found my notebook and was reading my essays and, asked me about them. I'm like, they're terrible, because I had already sort of built in myself that I'm not a good writer, right? When you have the people who are supposed to foster your ability tell you that you're not good at something, it's easy to internalize that. And I think it's something that so many young marginalized kids go through. And so this is years later. I'm like, I'm not a good writer. I just do this for fun. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm going to actually, I got something. He turns my essay into a competition without me knowing. I win the competition.
Wow.
It was a competition out of 10,000 writers.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so.
Well,
Yeah.
that friend has a golden, what does he get? First copies of every book?
First copies of everything, dinners when books come out, things like that. Yeah.
That's incredible. And so there was a 13-year gap, and then once you started writing, I mean,
Yeah.
they're just flowing. I want to talk about an earlier book, The Patriarchy Blues.
Yeah.
And I've just started reading that. You can tell you now have a fan. I finished this book, and now I'm on reading the earlier ones. But what made you write that? Because you're a young black man.
Yeah.
Confessing that you joined the patriarchy when you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
When you decided that you didn't like musicals because
Yeah.
you're a guy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it was exactly that. I think at some point I had this realization in my late 20s and early 30s that patriarchy had stolen so much from me, right? I think one great example was I went to a performing arts elementary school, Enrico Fermi, in Yonkers, New York, and I grew up loving musicals. I was in Guys and Dolls, I was in West Side Story and all these different things when I was still sort of new and green in the world and nothing that anyone thought mattered. I just loved the things that I loved. And I remember there started being this sort of like homophobic rhetoric around boys who enjoyed musicals. And it wasn't just men, it was everyone, right? This sort of, you see it still on TV, right? There's a certain sensibility around what men and boys are supposed to like versus if you like other things, what that means, right?
Sure.
Like I love fashion. Oh, art, so on and so forth, right? And so I was like, well, people are talking about this as if it's bad, and now I'm not gonna like musicals anymore, right? So I no longer wanna be the Phantom in Phantom of the Opera, as opposed to I wanna be the next Kobe Bryant, right? There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, as long as it's rooted in your actual passions versus you feeling like you're not allowed certain things. And so doing this unpacking and sort of having this internal reckoning, I decided that my second book would be sort of a more external reckoning, not just with sort of the ways that I was sort of forced and ushered into patriarchy, but the ways we all are, right? From misogynoir to rape culture to transphobia, homophobia, so on and so forth. It's all around us at all times. And whether we realize it or not, we internalize it and then externalize it on each other, right? What your expectations are of the person next to you based through a patriarchal lens.
Interesting that you said in the book that when you talked to people about the patriarchy, you found that women who thought they were feminists were also buying into the patriarchy.
Yeah. So I think that oftentimes when we're talking about dismantling things, as a society, we want to dismantle things that don't serve us individually and oftentimes don't have a lens on the other aspects of these systems that we are being served by. So as a really good example, many of the women in my life, I'm a 6'2" black guy, right? There's certain expectations that people have. Oh, well, you should go be able to do this, or this guy said something. Why don't you beat him up for saying that thing? I'm like, why are you projecting that on me? Like, oh, because you're a big black dude, right? And this is women oftentimes saying these things. Like, oh, do you realize how problematic that is, that you expect that I'm going to immediately jump to physicality because you too have been taught this thing. You've been taught this system. You've been taught this ethos of not only what a man's supposed to be, but also what women are supposed to expect of men, right? So much so that I think a lot of men are afraid to even be themselves because it makes them less of a man for a woman and things of that nature.
And so where we are precisely in this news cycle, if you will, is that the patriarchy is apparently the goal
Yeah.
of the way you put it, even when you were writing earlier, is that the world is in an identity crisis. We don't know who we are, but we do know that there are certain forces who say that unless you are a white man, then you are lesser in this universe.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. If you look at sort of, again, the news cycle right now, there are a lot of conversations about boys and men and what people are calling sort of this red pill manosphere of the internet, right? This idea of, I want a woman to be in the kitchen, and I want to, you have guys paying thousands of dollars to go do fake Navy SEAL training to try to be tougher and things of that nature. And it's all sort of rooted in, again, that identity crisis. Who am I as a person, right? What does it look like that I live in a country where all the men who are sort of amassing power are these sort of fake bravado having men? And if you are a young man struggling, if you're a boy struggling, and you're like, well, I want power, I want things for my family, is this the only way to get it? And so I think it's important that we show another way of getting to things, right? So it's one of the things I try to demonstrate on a regular basis, especially for boys and men. I love all my friends, like especially men, very much. Like I'm a hugger. Especially with my guys. I have a lot of friends. I think one of them actually he went to CUNY, and I think he's done CUNY TV before. Robert Jones Jr., author of The Prophets, which was a National Book Award finalist, and he's like my older brother, right? He's my big older brother. I hug and give him a kiss on the cheek every time I see him, and he's a black queer man, right? And I'm not, and that's fine. And I do that because I love him, but also because I want people to see that, right? I want people to see that affection and that love and that way of being a man that's not solely defined by, false toughness and bravado and this other sort of existential crisis that's happening on the other side.
Right, so we have a lot of work to do.
We do.
You find that you're succeeding and that it's receptive. I know that you dedicated your books to the kids and the Yonkers and the young people at all, just to make sure that they know what you say is that I see you and you're loved and you can be who you are.
Right, exactly.
Well, the storyline in your novel is about banning books, banning certain writers. And we were, discussing apparently that book, Patriarchy Blues, was banned.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that and the effort that went into that, and how do we get around it? I'm a little concerned because the whole DEI, effort is working when you just wipe out, the presence of people in history. There's a problem there.
Absolutely. So this book, so Patriarchy Blues and my first book, The Black Friend, are both banned. Patriarchy Blues specifically is very interesting because The Black Friend is a YA book. That's my very first book, and that was banned in many schools around the country. Patriarchy Blues, though, was actually banned in prisons, largely in the South and in the Midwest. Huh. And so I think part of the strategies, I think when people are not understanding, is that bannings, not just of books, but of curriculum, of history, the erasure of individuals and conversations is by design, because you don't want the masses to become more liberated mentally, emotionally, physically, so on and so forth. So what does it look like if you have a book that's sort of helping men, especially in Patriarchy Blues, unpack the harm that not only they have caused, but the harm that they have faced, right? What does it look like to say, I don't need to be this man that is rooted in toxic masculinity? It means that you might have a bunch of people who actually have redemptive arcs who are incarcerated, which is what we claim to want as a society, but we actually don't want, right? Part of the prison industrial complex is we want to keep people incarcerated because people make money from people being incarcerated, right? It's an entire business to make sure that people are in prisons and in
don't we
jails.
know it? And now shipped to El Salvador, et cetera. But
Exactly. And so what happens if they're reading books and things like that that are actually freeing them in the mind, freeing them in the heart and in the spirit, and they actually do come out of being incarcerated and they don't come back, right? So it's so I think that's largely why these prisons have banned the book, because they strategically have said, yeah, we're not going to allow for anything that might actually get you free.
exactly. And the black friend, I could understand why that was banned.
Yeah.
Right? You know, because this is advice for white people. Is that in the title or what?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's funny. A lot of black and brown people have read that book and loved it because they saw themselves in some of the situations that I had been in when I was younger. But that book, to this day, is my best-selling book. It's the book that's performed best, been read by the most people. And I think that for a lot of, you know, these institutions, a lot of these individuals, politically and so on and so forth, that's dangerous, right? White people wanting to actually not only think about, but dismantle the racism within themselves. And that book is interesting because it's not just an institutional reflection or a macro reflection. It's a interpersonal reflection. Like, you cannot touch a black person's hair or a person of color's hair, and this is actually why. Let's talk about it, versus just saying like, racism exists, right? And this is the history of it. No, how do you belong to that history? How do you, on a daily basis, sort of uphold that history?
Right. Well, now, in addition to all of the great writing, and again, perfect pitch in terms of things that are happening in our world, I must say, you actually are a fundraiser.
Yeah.
You've now created a 501c3 to disperse money. But I was so fascinated because I remember when somebody was raising like $1.5 million to send kids to see the Black Panther, and it turned out to be you.
Yeah. I, you know, my family, my mother and my grandmother sort of always taught me, if you have hands, do good work, right? So long as your hands can work, you do good work with them. And so when Black Panther was coming out, you know, as a kid who, we didn't always have the money to go to see every film and things like that. That changed as I grew up. But I was like, you know, this is important. Like, this movie is going to be so important, and I want as many black and brown children to be able to see it as possible. So created an effort, and it ended up going viral. Became the largest GoFundMe in history, the Black Panther Challenge, and we took over 700,000 kids to see the film for free around the world.
Wow.
And so that sort of like launched, or was the impetus of me saying, you know what, we need more of those sort of mutual aid moments. And so I think the second thing I did was, during the pandemic, we raised $250,000 to send people who were facing economic hardship $200 Cash App payments around the country, just to help them out financially and keep them afloat with food and things like that. And then I created a 501c3. We basically do that sort of work, you know, a few times a year.
So, and you have something planned coming up, right?
Yeah. So through my 501c3, we have stories. For Juneteenth, actually, we are going to have a care vehicle. We're going to put together care packages that include $100 in cash, along with hygiene products, food, and things like that, and actually drive around New York City and provide these care packages to Black people who are houseless and facing sort of economic hardship, and just let them know they're seen and they're cared for all over in every single borough on Juneteenth.
Well, that's tremendous work. So through your books and through your philanthropy, you're really doing a great job. Personally, one of the things that you write about in the Patriarchy Blues, in fact, the first thing is that you say that when you were 24 years old was sort of the pivot in your life when you were diagnosed, you know, with...
Yeah, so when I was 24, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and that was sort of this inflection point in my life where I had to, well, first, I was deeply depressed, to be quite frank.
Sure.
You know, being so young and finding out that you have this disease that could deeply debilitate you, and I had already started facing some of the symptoms of that, you know, not feeling sort of the feeling in my appendages and things like that, brain fog, things of that nature. But to be that age and sort of suddenly feel like you don't have your life in front of you anymore a bit. Especially like, to be transparent, I had already sort of faced things growing up, right? I was like fresh out of, college. I was in grad school at the time, and I'm like, this is where my life begins. My life begins. This is where I finally can afford to do certain things. I can travel, and then to find that out was just sort of this, punch to the gut. But I think I took that, and it sort of became the starting point or launch pad for who I am now.
Right.
Right. Instead of giving up, I said, okay, while I'm here, while I can do the things, like I said, let them be good things. If I'm going to potentially pass young or anything like that, then let me do good work while I'm here.
So you've really, you've already have a tremendous legacy, but I have a feeling you have like probably 30 more books in you, and maybe 40 more fundraisers, and and all of that. You fell in love. You got married. I saw the pictures, the wedding pictures.
Yeah.
I love Instagram. Now, I'm your newest follower.
Yeah, I think I'm also your newest follower too. So that
saw
works.
that.
Yeah. So that works out. Yeah. No, I've been living life. I've been lucky enough to meet people in my travels over the last, 10 years especially, who I love dearly. They love me back, from my wife to friends to people, just family. I just consider all these people family, when I meet people, I think people need to absorb energy and give back that energy when they can. And that's a very familial thing. It's sort of like this ancestral thing, if you would.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, I could talk to you forever. I'll call you later. But, and I'll be reading your books. Thank you so much for being with us today. You've really, contributed so much to this world, and including this new book, this thing of ours, which even if you're not 17, you should definitely read it. There's so much in there that you will learn. Thanks so much, Frederick Joseph,
Thank
for
you.
being here today, for writing the books that create a lot of change for a lot of people, and for actually being a terrific philanthropist and caring about so many people.
Thank you so much. I thank you for having me. This means the world, truly.
Great. Well, I think another New York Times best-selling book right here. Okay.
We'll see.
That is it for us at this time. Thank you all out there so much for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we will see you the next time. And now you can download the CUNY TV app in your Apple Store or in Google Play and find us there.